Hello and welcome back to another English 102 video. Today we're going to be talking about what analytical writing looks like. I think it's really crucial to have as many materials about this as I can because I think a lot of English 101 students are trained to do opinionated writing in 5-paragraph essays, and there are a lot of other types of writings that both your academic and your professional career will require besides just opinionated writing. I worked for a major hospital in Pittsburgh for 12 years. I was never once asked to write a 5-paragraph essay. I was never once asked to create opinionated writing. And so that's why your first paper, the rhetorical analysis paper, requires analytical writing. So let's talk a little bit about what that should look like. First, let's look at one of the cartoons, and then we will look at one of the student examples. Or perhaps let's start with the example, and then I'll talk about the other cartoon. Okay, so this is in Canvas, right? This is the analytical writing student example. This is from one of the sample papers. You can find these by looking for the rhetorical analysis tools module. There are sample papers in there, sample outlines, prezzies, all kinds of things designed to help you create a successful rhetorical analysis paper. This is from one of the A papers, right? It's about this cartoon, obviously, right? Now, remember, body paragraphs are the things in the middle, right? Not the introduction and not the conclusion. The instructions for the rhetorical analysis paper provide some pretty clear instructions for what you're supposed to do throughout the paper. So I'm not going to talk about the introduction and conclusion here. I want to talk about the body paragraphs, which is where you're going to be doing analytical writing. What does that mean? Well, like it says in the directions, look, at the end of the introduction, you're supposed to identify what is the cartoon's main argument, right? And then the whole rest of the paper is devoted to analyzing how the cartoon creates the argument. What role do the different parts of the cartoon play? The different parts of the cartoon are sometimes referred to as textual elements. But of course, when we say textual elements, we don't just mean these words or these words. We also mean the pennies, the dirty glass of water, the drip coming out of the tap, the raised pinky, the cufflinks, the name on the cuff. These are all textual elements, right? And you certainly don't have to explore and explain every single textual element in the political cartoon, but in order to explain how it works, how the argument works, you will need to explore more than a few textual elements. So let's look at how the sample student did that. Okay, as you can see, she's got a nice clear topic sentence here that lets you know which element she's going to be looking at, right? And so she's interested in explaining the text at the top here and how this connects to what is happening in each of the frames, right? So she makes clear early on what she's looking at. And then as it says at the bottom here, I'm encouraging you to think about where she's doing these things because you have to do the same thing in your paper, right? And so she's explaining what the textual element means, right? Both in terms of what it means in relation to the woman pinching her cheek and in terms of what it means in terms of what Snyder is doing, right? This is very similar, pardon me, to thinking about a song lyric, right? A song that you particularly like and trying to explain what it means to a friend, right? Like it's called textual analysis, right? And so as you can see, nowhere in here does the student say, what Governor Snyder did was really terrible. Nowhere in here does the student use the word I. I think the governor should have done this. Okay, academic readers, which is what you're aiming for as your audience in this paper, when they receive a genre like this, a rhetorical analysis paper that is designed for an academic audience, they do not expect to see I statements. They do not expect to see your opinion. They do not expect to see personal experience. They only want to see analytical writing. Explain to us how the argument within the cartoon works, right? That's why we had to talk about the rhetorical appeals. That's why we had to talk about rhetoric in general before we got to this point, because those are the tools that you use to explain the argument. Now, if this section is where she explains what those textual elements working together mean in that part of the cartoon, why isn't that enough? Well, when you think about rhetoric, as you know from the readings, it's all about the impact that it has on an audience, right? It is the audience who determines whether rhetoric is effective, right? Not the creator, not some random instructor, not the rhetoric police, right? That is determined by the audience whether it is effective, right? And so it's not enough for her to just explain what this thing means. She has to explain, as it says here, why did the artist design things that way? What effect did the artist want it to have on the reader? Right? And so again, she does a nice job of showing you that, well, obviously the decision to switch the water line to the Flint River did not literally save pennies. It probably saved more money than that. But Zygas is doing this to highlight the irresponsibility of this change, or perhaps Snyder's preoccupation with saving money over human lives, right? And so that's Zygas's opinion anyway. Again, we're not talking about my opinion or your opinion. We're talking about the argument that the artist creates, right? And so she explains why the artist created it this way. And of course, when you start talking about audience effect, then you really have to think about the rhetorical appeals, right? Is this a fact that is designed to help the reader understand what happens? So for example, that's an appeal to logos, right? So that you know where the event happened and who this is. Those are appeals to logos. But depicting the penny saved as the money saved as pennies is an appeal to pathos. It's designed to make you angry towards Snyder, right? And indeed, she writes about that quite convincingly in the latter part of the paragraph. And indeed, as it says here, your body paragraphs, you know, as you work through the different textual elements you have chosen to explain, you're going to need to identify which rhetorical appeal is coming into play, right? And indeed, to do that, you will need to use these words. Like I said in the other video, I believe, I know they're funny words and they seem funny to us, but it's because they're Greek, right? They were coined by our friend Aristotle over 2,000 years ago, and yet they are still relevant and applicable in opinionated creations, or rhetoric, I should say, today, right? Whether it's opinionated articles, which you'll read some of down the road, political cartoons like you're analyzing, etc., etc. Okay, so, you know, again, this is a good sample paragraph. It's not perfect, but it shows you what I'm looking for. And it's reassuring, right? Because it comes from a student who's taken the same class, had the same assignment as you, right? Lots of other textual elements to talk about here, right? And, you know, you want to make your own interpretations. Did you notice that she does not bring in outside source materials? She does not bring in some source to tell us how much Snyder actually saved. It doesn't matter, right? Your role in the body paragraphs is to explain how the cartoon works, how the argument works. You should not need outside sources for that. You will need some sources in the introduction to help you explain to the reader what happened in Flint. But once you get into the body paragraphs, it needs to be all about the cartoon. If you find yourself reaching for a source or a quote from a source in a body paragraph, then you know you are shying away from the analysis, because analytical writing is difficult and it's something that a lot of students don't have very much practice with. Briefly, let's look at the other cartoon here, but of course there is a sample paper about this one as well. You could look at one of the body paragraphs to look at how they operate. But I just briefly wanted to mention, you know, kind of the same kind of concepts in relation to this, right? So, you know, here's a textual element here. We have this thing floating in the water. It's a buoy, right? And so, you know, it's labeled Flint water supply. And so we know, okay, this is an appeal to logos that's designed to let us know what all this gross water represents, right? To help the audience understand the underpinnings of the argument that the artist is making, right? Because think about it, right? If we don't have this and we don't have this, right, and we don't recognize his face, then the cartoon doesn't really make sense, right? This is why you need appeals to logos. But you can go further here, right? Well, why is this depicted as a buoy? What might that mean? Well, buoys are usually they're warnings, right? Of water that's low, or don't take your annoying jet ski out beyond this point, things like that, right? And so maybe this is designed to be a warning. Is it a warning for Snyder, perhaps? And it's up to you to interpret what the artist seems to be getting at there. Did you notice that the buoy is rusty? Right, you see how I zoomed in there? I would encourage you to do close, it's what's called close textual analysis. Why is it designed that way? Why did the artist make the buoy rusty? What is he trying to say? Well, things get rusty when they're neglected and forgotten, like an old car, right? So maybe he's suggesting that Governor Snyder has forgotten about the people of Flint. Same thing with the, fish at the bottom. Right? This does not mean literally that the Flint River water killed the fish. It's there for other reasons, right? It's there to as a symbol of other things. It's designed to make you feel a certain way, right? And indeed, different textual elements do different work, right? I would suggest to you that both the fish and this part of the meter are appeals to pathos. They're designed to make the reader feel a certain way. But as you're writing the paper, you have to delve into explaining how they're designed to make you feel, because these two things do very different work. This is perhaps designed to create fear, this idea of death. Okay, whereas this is more about outrage. The minute the artist chose to put that word there, and look at how it's right in the center of the panel. This is designed to make any audience member angry, right? Whether they have kids or not. When they see that and they think about what this says about his priorities here, it's designed to create frustration, anger, right? And so again, different elements do different work. That's why you need to be able to break things down in the paragraph like this. Identify the element or set of elements, explain the meaning of them, and then explain the purpose of them. It's in-depth work, and honestly, if you're doing it properly, you're going to come out above the required 750 word count quite easily, I think. That's about all I've got. I'm really looking forward to reading your first paper. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions, remember, you can always feel free to message me in Canvas or navigate over to the homepage. Click that link and you can join my Google Meet meeting during office hours anytime you want. You don't even have to message me ahead of time. Take care now, and I'll talk to you later.